breast cancer rates in women significantly higher in women who are exposed to electric light in the evenings.
Where do you see the future of circadian lighting headed? What do you think that's going to look like?
The evidence shows us that really it's the light in the morning hours, particularly before noon, first part of the morning. Doesn't have to be at dawn, but in the morning is way more effective for our health.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wellness for Life. I'm your host, Niki Wolf, and today I'm thrilled to have Dr. Martin Moore-Ede with us, a renowned expert in circadian science and the impacts of life on human health. Dr. Moore has dedicated over 40 years to understanding how light affects our bodies, from our sleep patterns to serious health conditions like diabetes and cancer. And today we're going to be discussing the junk light we're exposed to daily, how blue-rich LED light could be harming our health, and the ways we can use light to improve our well-being. So stick around. This information is for everyone who uses electric lighting, needs to hear this episode. Dr. Moore, thank you so much for being here.
Delighted to be with you, Niki.
Yes. Well, I'd love to hear, what started you getting into this field, and just sharing a little bit about your journey coming here.
Well, I trained as a doctor, as a physician, and my first job was I was heading towards being trained as a surgeon. And after I graduated, I did a surgical residency. And during that first year of surgical residency, I was working those extended hours that doctors do, 36 hours on your feet nonstop, 12 hours off, back in for 36. I was working, as I now understand, under bright blue-rich fluorescent lights. We'll talk about why they're a problem, and also why the LEDs today are even worse. And what I found is I found myself getting really incompetent as a doctor due to fatigue and due to disruption of my circadian clock, my circadian rhythms. I was writing prescriptions I couldn't make sense of the next day. I was nodding off in the operating room and so forth. And it wasn't just me, it was everyone else who was training alongside me. That got me interested in this whole issue of what was controlling when we sleep, when we're fatigued, when we make errors. And it was the early days of people's understanding about circadian rhythms. That's the 24-hour rhythms in the body. And I took a detour out of surgery to do a PhD at Harvard Medical School on the circadian clocks and how they work. And I also, at that point, after that, I went on and joined the faculty as a professor in the physiology department at Harvard, and built a lab there where we did some of the breakthrough research through and finding where the clock was in the human brain, how it was synchronized by light. And since then, I've been working on sort of applications of that. What, in fact, is the light that's healthy? What light is unhealthy? And then how do we make that light? And so literally building LED lights that are healthy as opposed to the unhealthy ones, and doing the work on that. And now I'm really sort of spending my time helping people understand how essential light is to health. And so I'm delighted to be doing this podcast with you, Niki, on that topic.
Absolutely. I think over the last few years, we've understood, or at least heard more in the news and social media, the importance of light for health. And I know that you said that, the light we're exposed to is as crucial to our health as the food we eat or the air we breathe. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes, just like junk food may taste all right, taste good, may be easy to use. We have junk light these days. The lights that are made purely to provide brightness, in other words, light to be able to see, without realizing that equally important, if not more important, is light has very big effects on our health, on our sleep, on our heart health, our diabetic or obesity risks, our cancer risks, our mental health. And these effects now are very well demonstrated. Unfortunately, most of the lights available today are these blue, what we call blue pump LEDs. They're based on a technology that's very energy efficient, converts electricity into light, but it does it by making blue light, and then it smears it out to make it white light by adding phosphors to the LEDs. But basically, the problem is they're too rich in blue light, and that becomes a problem in the evening hours and the nighttime hours, because we naturally see blue rich light during the day. That's what daylight is. It's full of blue light. That's very healthy. You want to see as much of that as possible. But during the evening hours, the last thing you need to see is this blue light, because it really gives the wrong cues to our body. It screws up our biological clock. It causes all sorts of ill health. And so really what we've done is create light that is purely cheap. It's designed to be cheap. It's designed to be bright. It's designed to be reasonably attractive, but it's terrible for our health. And that's a huge thing, because people take light for granted. We just switch on the lights, and whatever light is there is, that's what the light's there. In fact, the light you use is going to it makes a huge difference to how healthy we are, and also how long we're going to live. People die sooner under the wrong type of lighting. And so there's now huge amount of work on this, lots of evidence that we need to be starting to change our lights.
Absolutely. And would it be safe to say that in the big picture, blue light isn't necessarily unhealthy? It's just the time of day. And like you're saying, during the day, it's very healthy to be consuming blue light. Would you say from either obviously the sun or even indoor lights, it's just the problem arises in the evening?
Yeah, blue's neither good or bad. It's the time of day you see it is the whole story. And and unfortunately, most lights you buy are, switch on, and they're switched on day or night. They don't change at all. So that's the problem. It's getting excessive blue rich light at night and not getting enough light during the day. We spend over 90% of our time indoors, most of us. And in fact, the light indoors is rather poor quality compared to natural light outside. So people who get outside in daylight, doesn't have to be sun, but in regular daylight, it can even be raining, are much healthier than people who stay indoors all the time.
Absolutely. This makes me think, if this invention's already not created, a light switch where you have the option of blue light or more of a warming red, orange light to have in the evening, maybe some sort of, I don't know, I'm guessing it has to be invented at this point already. But, what specific issues are linked to this blue rich LED light, particularly in the evening?
Yeah, well, let's just talk. Just first of all, you're right. It has been invented and it has now been used. And so we basically built lights like that. About 5-7 years ago now, we put lights like that into 65 Fortune 500 companies. They're now light bulbs. The key is something that automatically changes, and that's and that now is there are new lights coming out that will do that shortly. For regular light bulbs as well. But anyway, so that it's a problem. We know the cause of the problem. We have the solution to the problem. It is available. The problem is most people don't know about it is really the issue. But getting back to your other questions, what's actually going on? I think to understand this, you've got to understand a little bit of the physiology. Basically, why is blue light? I mean, why wouldn't any light do it? Well, it turns out in our eyes, we have blue light detectors. We have cells in the back of our eye. They're called retinal ganglion cells, or the long name is intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. That's a mouthful, but IPRGCs. Those cells contain a photopigment called melanopsin. Melanopsin is exquisitely sensitive to sky blue light. In other words, it's not triggered by violet. It's not triggered by green, or red. But it's triggered by this, when it detects blue. And blue is a signal that the body uses to know whether it's day or night outside. In other words, whether it's dark outside or whether it's light outside. So that's, and the reasons why it's that particular color is kind of interesting, because when life began in the oceans, and the sunlight was falling on the seas, the oceans. All the colors of the rainbow absorbed by seawater except for sky blue light, which penetrates deep into the ocean depths. It's not absorbed at nearly the same amount. So basically, when you go down in the ocean, it's blue down there, no other color. And that turned out to be for the primitive organisms as life began, blue was daytime and black was nighttime. And that's how the whole thing began. And we've got that same mechanism today across, virtually all animal species. It's a really fundamental part of nature. Anyway, so we've got that blue light detector in our eyes. There's a pathway from our eyes to our circadian clock, thing called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. That's the master clock in the brain. That clock is therefore timed by this blue light arriving in the eyes. The clock, when it sees no blue light at all, will keep on running in a 24-hour cycle, or near 24-hour cycle of its own accord, but it's normally synchronized. We're kept in sync with day and night. We've just been through a daylight saving time change, right? So basically what we've done is changed the time of our living related to natural time. It takes a little time to adjust to those things, and that's the part of the problem. The body is slow to adjust to those things, and we have something effectively like jet lag when you move to a new place. And when you get into that jet lag, or what's called circadian disruption, which is disruption of the circadian clocks, and we should say that it's not just one clock in the brain. There are millions of them all the way through the body. All the tissues and cells and organs of the body have clocks in them. When those clocks are all beating in sync with each other, then we're healthy. When they get out of in discordant pattern, like a orchestra that's tuning up and it's not, playing the same tune, as it were, and things are out of rhythm, then in fact that leads to our immune system failing, our metabolic systems failing, our ability to fight cancer in the body fails, all sorts of things go on. So, and that mechanism from the eyes to the clock in the brain is communicated to the cells by key hormones like melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that is not the sleep hormone. It doesn't do that, but it does signal darkness, and it signals to the body it's time to repair and recover cells and suppress cancers and so forth. All the nighttime activities, repair and restore and recover. And we have other hormones that tell us that it's daytime, or daytime's just arriving, like cortisol, where hormone comes out just before dawn. Again, that's a signal from these clock systems. And so we have these hormones telling the body and keeping us in sync. So people who are healthy and who get out every day in strong daylight on a regular basis, who sleep in the dark at night, who don't see blue light in the evening, and you can do that by getting zero blue bulbs. They don't get this confusing blue light, are far healthier, have less cardiac disease, heart disease, less diabetes, less obesity, and they actually live longer. And the effect's huge. This is something, everybody can do. But few people know how important it is, to do and live a life that gets us back in sync with the 24-hour natural day-night cycle.
Yeah, I know we'll transition to everyday practices that we can implement, because I know that there's things with new technology. I mean, there's settings on your phone, on your computer. We can block out this blue light. But something that came to mind as you were discussing is, what about for places, and I'm curious if you've done research on this, like Alaska, or I know when I went to Scotland, their amount of light or their amount of darkness can vary drastically. Has there been research that you know of that's been done to kind of correlate the light and darkness with the health of that community?
Yes. I mean, there's greater instance of affective disorders and, depression and anxiety in those communities. We know people who see less light during the day and are 30% more likely to have depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other psychiatric disorders. So it basically important to maintain the schedule, and people, who live in those environments, particularly they have the challenge in the winter of having no light at all, particularly above the Arctic Circle. or the sun's very low on the horizon. And in the daytime, they got sun, the 24-hour sun. And there you really have to control your bedroom. You make sure you totally black out during the hours. Make sure you may need additional lights, especially in the morning hours, that are blue rich and that can help keep you in sync. But yes, there's a lot of work on that. That's one of the challenges of, living and in those environments. And so, yes, it's a big challenge in those places to have the day-night cycle such an extreme, going from one extreme to the other.
Absolutely. And I can imagine you're living there. I mean, you're accustomed to implementing these changes. Blackout curtains. It's part of the practice. I guess maybe the hardest thing is traveling there where you're not quite as ready, but you probably adapt. I've read earlier that you are doing some work in the Circadian Light Research Center. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing to develop healthier lighting options.
Well, this is just to take you through this. At around, when we first of all, when I worked at Harvard Medical School as a professor, we identified where the located was the circadian clock in the human brain, and we showed that it was synchronized by light. But at that time, we had no clue that it was actually blue light that was doing it. So that was something that only became apparent in the last 20, 25 years. And the evidence also started to come out that breast cancer rates in women significantly higher in women who are exposed to electric light in the evenings. The effects are huge. So before the invention of electric light, 20 women out of every 100,000 got breast cancer. Now it's like 140 women out of every 100,000. So that's like a sevenfold change in risk. We know that women who today who live in parts of the world without electricity have very low rates of breast cancer. It's a rare disease. We know that blind women don't tend to get, pretty rare having breast cancer in blind women if they're totally blind from an early age. So it's all to do with that light exposure is one of the things. So that was first recognized in about 2007 or so. And that got us interested because a lot of the companies I was speaking to and people I was speaking to had employees and women who worked around the clock. And they said, what are we going to do what are we going to do? We can't switch out the lights in our businesses. We can't stop working at night because we have to run the oil refinery, the manufacturing plant, the railroad, the airline. We don't turn off things at night. How can we do it? And so that's when we realized that the discovery that came along that it was blue that was important. Said, all right, well, let's say we could build lights so you could see and work that had no blue in them, effectively zero blue. And so we set about designing lights that could do that, building new types of LEDs. So instead of having a blue pump LED that was on all the time and always emitting blue, you used two types of LED lights. One that was blue rich during the day and another that was zero blue at night. And what we found in our studies and people that we could, if you had blue light at night, people will become, a regular healthy person will become diabetic or pre-diabetic by the end of just one night of exposure. Their glucose tolerance test, the way you measure whether someone's diabetic or not, failed in people who had blue light. But if we put them under zero blue light, that wouldn't happen. So we could see that we could actually build lights to do that. We found that when you did that, and we put them now into various workplaces, and we were able to show that people were healthier, happier. They were less fatigued, less sleepy. They were able to sleep well when they're off the job, and they had fewer gastrointestinal disorders. All sorts of things we're able to demonstrate by using those lights. So a lot of the research there is saying, okay, let's invent lights that are built for human physiology, and that suit our bodies, as opposed to these off-the-shelf, mass-produced, what we call junk light, that is actually designed just to be able to produce the maximum brightness for the least amount of electricity. And so But unfortunately, 98% or 99% of the lights on the stores today are these junk lights. And that's why people need to be aware of it. And that's why I've written a book called The Light Doctor, which you can get on Amazon and elsewhere, which explains this, to the regular person, not to the scientists, because the scientists already know all about this. In fact, this is well-established science. I've just done a consensus study with almost 250 scientists from all over the world who are the leaders in research in this area. And they all came out recognizing the importance of this blue light, that it causes increased obesity, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, recognizing we're in agreement on that, in agreement that we need to get rid of blue light. You've got to have as little blue as possible in the evenings and at night. You've got to sleep in the dark at night. And so all this science is known by the scientists. And that's why I wrote the book, because I want to explain that to the general audience, because while the scientists know about it, most people don't. And it is certainly a huge benefit. I mean, we're causing all sorts of diseases today. If I can just take another one as an example, the lights we use, the light indoors is artificial light. It's artificial because it's nothing like natural daylight. So even if you're in a room with windows, the light coming through the windows is filtered because the glass filters out the ultraviolet, and it also filters out some of the infrared part of the spectrum. But it also filters out, because the filters are imperfect, the violet light. Well, that turns out to be hugely critical to something like myopia. Children get short-sighted. The lack of violet light, because these blue LEDs don't produce any violet light, the lack of violet light is linked to now the fact that people are getting, children are getting, it's incredible rates of short-sightedness and myopia in young children. So we are living in a very artificial type of light. And so part of it is designing lights that now full spectrum lights, or lights that are, have the missing elements put back into them, so that we can really make people healthy.
Well, I've recorded roughly 100 episodes, and one common conversation that we have is the importance of just getting outside. And so I think, this almost seems to fill the gaps of all these different issues of getting outside can move the needle for our health so significantly. It's free, it's cheap, it's easy. A few other things that you mentioned, and in my brain, I think, okay, blue light is going to be this bright light you think of in the hospitals and the grocery stores. And then the other version is like, and I have it in our bedroom, it's this, very dark red light. I can't imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, I can't imagine doctors' offices or all these businesses that you're switching up the lights and providing these new lights are going to be these red bulbs. Yes, that improves their sleep, but I can imagine, if I was trying to do work in my bedroom with that dark red light, I'm falling asleep automatically to that. I'm guessing there's maybe a spectrum of lights where it doesn't have the blue, but it's still bright and somewhat awakening.
Absolutely. We actually, the lights we designed, I mentioned that we did design LED lights. Go into that a little bit more. Very good point. We're not designing lights. We recognize that you could use red light, but it's not compatible with working. And most people want to do things in the evening, and certainly in workplaces, you can't do that. So I said we needed to remove the blue, but you can replace the blue with another color, like we can replace it with violet in the mix. And when you put violet light instead of the blue, you can actually make the light white again. In other words, it whitens the light, the balance with all the different colors. So you build light, so the light is a little more yellowish than it's not a harsh blue. It's certainly not harsh bluish white like some of these LEDs are, but it's a very comfortable light. In fact, people love working on it because it's very comfortable working. And the violet is interesting because violet light actually stimulates alertness. So people are actually alert under it, but it does not disrupt their circadian rhythms and does not disrupt their sleep. So violet light is actually, people think about blue as being the alerting color in light. And when we're talking about these colors, by the way, just so everyone's on the same page, we all look at light as whitish, yellowish. That's an optical illusion. the light we see is made up of all the colors of the rainbow. That's what our eyes are observing. That's what's coming into our eyes, all these different color lights. It's our brain that puts it together as whitish or yellowish. So if we get the mixture of these different colors right, we can make white light, and make white light in a way that's healthy and that is not containing blue. So that's what we do. Yes, we're engineering special lights. And so if you look for lights that have 0 blue or less than 2% blue, and you can find there are various manufacturers like Sora, SORAA. Another one is EchoSense. It has circadian blue, lights, fixtures, and so forth. Those lights contain lights that are useful in the workplace and won't put you to sleep. In fact, quite the opposite. They help you stay awake. People are more alert working at night under these lights than there are under even the regular LEDs. So it's all a matter of engineering it for health and alertness and cognitive performance. And that's the key to the designing these lights.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's almost hearing this. It's like, why do you even have blue lights? If you're outside, get plenty of regular sunshine, not through a window, might as well just put all these violet lights in your house.
That's right. That's right. So and now they're a little more expensive, of course, and that's the reason. And that's partly because they're new and they're not so mass produced. Things get cheap when you can really mass produce them. The other lights are produced in the millions or billions. All right. But, but they're cheap. They may be cheap, but they're harmful. So if you start getting obese and diabetic as a result, as you do when you use the regular LED lights at night, people say, well, then I've got to get on the Zempic or something like that. Well, that's going to cost you $600-800 a month. Think about it. $25 light bulb is cheap compared to $800 a month. And that light bulb will last years, right? So it's cheap but it's expensive as compared to a $3 light bulb in Costco.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as far as other implementations that we can utilize, getting outside, and actually let's sidetrack this. Is there a best time of day of consuming blue light? I know that, right. The conversation around vitamin D, what does that look like? Absolutely.
That's a very good question. The evidence shows us that really it's the light in the morning hours, particularly before noon, first part of the morning. Doesn't have to be at dawn, but in the morning is way more effective for our health. That's the key time to get out. Fascinating studies done with, for example, patients admitted to hospital because they've got anxiety, depression, PTSD. One half of the rooms of the hospital are facing on one side of the building, south and east. They get all the morning sun. The other half of the rooms are facing north and west. The patients in those sun-facing rooms, the morning sun-facing rooms, get out of hospital in half the time. Wow. They have the same drugs, same doctors, same therapy sessions, everything's the same conditions, but half the time they get out. It takes for them to get cured. That tells you something, that it's the morning light that is really key. And that's also compatible with our circadian clocks, which tend to drift a little bit on the long side. So the time they really need to be reset and firmly set is in the morning hours. That is what's synchronizing us. And so that's really the message. Get out before the noonday sun. You don't want to be there are effects of too much UV radiation if you're in too much bright sunlight for too long. But in the morning, you really have got much less intense light and you get the full health benefits from that. So that's the key there.
Absolutely.
Go for a walk, go for a cycle ride, sit out inside, whatever. You don't even have to be an exercise freak, but just get out.
Yeah. And is there an ideal time frame? Sometimes in the morning after I eat breakfast, I'll just do a quick 10-minute walk with the dogs to get a little bit of sunshine. I'll try to eat my meals outside during the workday, but is there an optimal time in regards to consuming, the blue light?
Well, I think, you get the best effects you can get out for at least an hour is the ideal, right? So in other words, 10 minutes may not do a huge amount to this. But you may not do a whole lot with in 10 minutes. But it's better to get out than not at all, because the amount of light outside is like, 1,000 times brighter than the light indoors. We live in very dim light indoors. We don't realize how little light stimulation we get when it feels, our eyes adjust, so it doesn't feel so dark and dim. But really, we're living under sort of effectively twilight levels of light.
Absolutely. I realized where I'm currently living, finding out that I didn't get great light in the house because all my plants are dying indoors, and I'm watering them, but I'm just not getting enough light inside. And so maybe if you have some plants that are thriving indoors, you get a good amount. But I think doing our part, getting outside. What are your thoughts on blue light blocking glasses?
Well, that can be very helpful in the evenings, but make sure you get the right blue blocked, because most of the blue blocking glasses are actually blocking entirely the wrong blue. They're doing you no good at all. Secondly, you don't want to be wearing blue blocking glasses during the day. That makes no sense at all. So what you need to do is actually be wearing them in the evening hours. That's when you need to get rid of the blue. So, but the blue blocking glasses you want to look for are not the ones that have this sort of attractive little blue reflection to them and they look, really attractive. You got to get ones that are really yellow orangey in color in order to block their light. If they're not like that, then it's a very good chance they're not blocking the right blue at all. And so when you go into the opticians and they say, would you like some blue blocking in your glasses? They charge you another couple $100, to put the treatment on. Actually does you no good whatsoever. They're blocking entirely the wrong blue, and it makes, there is not a benefit. And besides, you're wearing them day and night, your typical, eyewear prescription.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. I have a handful of the glasses. Some look almost clear, like you don't see, and you're like, okay, well then that's just great technology. But I remember my very first pair, I almost felt like a construction worker because they were huge. They wrapped around and they were very orange. And so it sounds like that's, the optimal one I should be going for. I also know, on your phone, you can have a setting where the blue light turns off, and I have it set at I can't remember what time of day, but maybe it's like 6 or 7 o'clock. My screen will turn more of this dark amber orange color. And so if I am looking at my phone or on it in the evening, that does kind of help a little bit as well. As far as growing, our understanding of circadian health, which we've discussed quite a bit here, where do you see the future of circadian lighting headed? What do you think that's going to look like?
Well, the future of lighting is certainly going to be circadian lighting. I think it's a question of the time, because there is such a fixed base of the industry is so locked into this blue pump LED lights, mass produced cheaply, a lot of it in Asia. And that's what's on the shelves. And that's, and if you're just looking for cheap light, that's what's available. So the challenge is the education. The other side of it is the regulations are becoming a problem, because the government, in its wisdom, Department of Energy, is saying we've got to make lights more efficient to use less electricity. Well, the problem is their rules are heavily favoring the bright blue pump LEDs. They're making it harder, and the new rules that will be going in and, plan to go in 2028, which we're challenging, would make it very hard to actually produce healthy light. They're really favoring unhealthy light. It's almost like there's a new law that for grocery stores that says you can only sell junk food. You can't sell healthy food. It's that type of thing we're doing, which is crazy. And that's based on the fact that the way that light is measured by the government is in lumens per watt. And so what's lumens? Lumens is a measure of brightness. It actually is only measuring the green and yellow parts of the light. That's all it measures. It doesn't measure the healthy parts of the light, the blue, which is so important for circadian health, the red light, which is very important for repair of tissues and healing of scars and everything else, growth of hair. You can't, those things that are healthy parts of the light are not being measured. So only measuring this brightness of light and lumens per watt, that's how much electricity it is. So if you make it really high, you really are favoring sort of unhealthy light, which is a crazy thing to be doing. And we're trying to save the health of the planet. But what we're doing is, saving electricity may be, but at the cost of health. And of course, if you look at the energy savings we're creating, we're actually now, all that electricity, is it reducing greenhouse gases? No, because we're using all that electricity on new artificial intelligence data centers and the cryptocurrency mining data centers are consuming all this extra electricity that we're saving by becoming unhealthy. So it's a crazy scenario. So we've got some education to do. So going forward, we need to get the regulations, under control, get the craziness out of it. We need to get more choices of more different types of lights that people can use. Get the education out there, and that's huge. And that's why my book, The Light Doctor, is designed just to help this whole educational process, just like we're doing in this podcast here. So the more people know about this, the better. And so I'd urge everyone to take a look at the book, take a look at the lights that are available. And we've also got some website that explains the different types of light, like circadian-friendly.org, for example. So those are places that people can go to get more information. But this is something so easy to manage. Mm-hmm. If you think about environmental pollutants that we are all faced with, we're faced with, these forever chemicals, the PFAS chemicals and the toxics, with microplastics, all that type of stuff, asbestos, everything else. Those are very expensive, very hard to get rid of out of our environment. But this is so simple. All you have to do is to change the darn light bulb. It's as simple as that to get rid of the pollutant. And so it's something that people just need to know how to do. And we can get people healthy because it makes a huge difference to whether you're going to live long, healthy life. Big studies now, 88,000 people in the study who are looking at how much light they use during the day, during the night, and years worth of difference in how long they live, whether they're following healthy lighting principles, getting out each day, sleeping in the dark at night and so forth, avoiding blue light in the evenings. Those people are going to do way better and live longer, have less heart disease, less cancer, and so forth. So it's something we can all do. And, it is not hard to do. So this is just a question of really having people aware of it.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of health concerns, whether it's obesity, whatever sort of like chronic issue there is, sometimes it's really difficult for people to implement changes. And it's a matter of, okay, I'm willing to, clean up the food I eat, move my body more, or I'm not willing to do X, Y, Z. This seems like a very simple change that you can do that can drastically move the needle for your health. Again, like you said, it's not that expensive. I can imagine, getting this into hospitals could be crucial, not just for the healing of patients, but for the doctors and the employees working around the clock. Their schedules are already taxing to the body, but to make that simple change. And like you said, the violet light has been shown to kind of increase more alertness. So that's fantastic. I also love the analogy that you used of the junk food and the health food. And it's funny because it's election day. We're recording this and, it comes back to this bigger, and we won't get into politics a little bit, but this bigger conversation, it's a give or take. Yes, we could do stuff that might be more environmentally friendly, but what else is that going to affect? What other sort of things is it going to implicate? And like you said, it's, it could be more efficient in one way, but what are the consequences of doing this? And I think that's where we have to kind of figure out and balance, not only for ourselves, but globally within our community, is how is this affecting our environment and, what makes more sense? And frankly, for some, it might be more of that environmental thing that's more important for them. But I think for a lot of us listening, I think improving our longevity, improving our health span, improving our children's lives, and reducing some of these chronic conditions, is a pretty powerful convincer on my end to make some of these changes. And, it's not that difficult. Get outside, get the blue light in the day, avoid blue light in the evening, change your light bulbs. Doctor, is there anything else that we haven't covered today that you feel is important to know as the foundation of health and circadian health, or even, practical tips, suggestions that you can do on a daily basis?
Well, I think one of the things that we should discuss is you need the right light and the discipline of going outside during the day, the discipline of avoiding blue light in the evenings, putting replacement lights in place. Sleeping in the dark is critical. 50% of people sleep with the lights on or TV on. That is highly disruptive to sleep. But the important principle is regularity. In other words, if people who are on a regular routine, a regular schedule, are much healthier than people who are, jumping all over the map in terms of irregularity, staying up some nights, going to sleep in other times. That's really associated with ill health, with a failed immune system and so forth. So having the regularity of the pattern of living like that is really critical. And what matters is what's called the amplitude of our circadian rhythms. You want them big and robust because you're in sync with day and night on an absolute regular basis. So the regularity as well as the light regime is really something that can make a huge difference to people's life and relieve them of the number of diseases that are associated or influenced by the wrong light at the wrong time are huge. It's a growing thing. It's everything from, mental disorders, dementia. It affects cardiovascular disease, I mentioned, heart disease, hypertension, all sorts of things. So we could be so easily for us to become healthier just by paying attention to the light. And as I say, it's an easy one. It's not an expensive one. You don't have to, and you don't have to change so much about your lifestyle to manage it. So I'd urge everyone to take a look. In fact, and those concerned with the policy of this and making a difference, we have a campaign for healthy lighting that we've started going. That's on circadianlight.org, where we're trying to get this word out and try to get employers educated that they need to put healthy lights in the workplace. Hospitals need to be educated. Unfortunately, most hospitals have terrible lighting in terms of health, which makes no sense whatsoever.
I think the same with the food that they provide.
Yeah, as well. Yeah, it's crazy. They may have all this wonderful medical technology, but if in fact you're undermining it with the basics, it really doesn't make that much difference. And people can be cured and out of hospital much faster if they manage the lights in the hospital better.
Yeah, I agree. I think there can be some, and like you said, that they have some incredible resources there, but there's some little things. Maybe it might not be so little on a grand scheme, but changing the lighting, changing the food, making it more nutrient dense and less processed food, I think can really make an impact over there. But I think this was fantastic. I think we explored a good amount of the science and understanding. I feel compelled to make a difference and kind of adjust things within my life to better suit my health and ensuring I'm getting the blue light in the day and avoiding it in the evening. But this was fantastic. Any lasting things that we might have missed?
No, I think you've covered a good range of the topics, and the basics are there. And as I say, you can always read more in the Light Doctor just to get a fuller understanding of this, and also something you can use. I just had someone call up and want to get a dozen copies of the Light Doctor because they thought it was so important. They wanted to give Christmas gifts to their family members, and they also want to buy some light bulbs so they could give them each family member a copy of the book and a copy of one of these evening light bulbs. And so, and there are special discounts there we can give people if they want to do that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here and giving your time and your insights. I think our listeners are going to walk away with some valuable information.
Good. Thanks, Niki. Good talking with you.
Of course. All right. Take care.